Hey everyone, Jason here, founder and co-CEO of mindbodygreen and your host of the mindbodygreen podcast. Look, the conversation on longevity has advanced by leaps and bounds since we launched mindbodygreen back in 2009. And while it's great that there are so many evidence-based recommendations on this subject than ever before, it's become overwhelming and impossible to keep up with them all, so much so it can actually add more stress to your life than improvement. This is why my wife and co-founder Colleen and I set out to cut through the noise and answer this question when we began writing our new book over 2 years ago called The Joy of Well-Being, a practical guide to a happy, healthy, and long life. Practical being the key word here. Now, in this book, we've taken 14 years of our insider knowledge, leveraging all we've learned from the best experts in the world and the latest and greatest science, and distilling it down to just the most practical info. Essentially, we've done the legwork so you don't have to. We're confident that we can get you to 80% of your maximum well-being and help you maximize joy at the same time. If you're a fan of mindbodygreen or interested in longevity, I know you're going to love this book. So go to thejoyofwellbeing.com or to Amazon or your favorite book retailer to order your copy today. Thank you so much.
There's no such thing as a good or bad brain. There's a trained brain and an untrained brain. No such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory and an untrained memory. It's like, going to your child and say, focus, study, remember this. That's like going to somebody and saying, play the ukulele, who's never taken a class on how to play the ukulele. And so, I realized that there was this gap in education where they teach you what to learn, but not how to learn. They teach you what to learn, math, history, science, Spanish, but very few classes on how to. There's no class called focus or concentration, right, or thinking.
Hey everyone, what if I told you that you could improve your brain health no matter your age, health history, or lifestyle habits? It is possible to bolster your brain at any stage of life. Take it from today's guest, Jim Kwik, who was once known as the boy with the broken brain. A childhood head injury at age 5 left him struggling in school, but through decades of discovering different learning habits, he was able to literally rebuild his brain. Now look, Jim is the guy on brain coaching. He's a leading expert in brain optimization, memory improvement, and accelerated learning. And he's here to talk about all the different memory hacks and training methods to optimize your brain power, including one of my favorites, how to remember someone's name when you first meet them. Think of this episode as a free brain health bootcamp led by one of the top memory coaches in the country, if not the best. It is such a great honor to have Jim on the show today. Jim, welcome.
Jason, so good to be here.
So great to have you. As I said before the show, I can't believe it's taken this long to have you, but better late than never. You are the man when it comes to all things brain health, memory, optimization. So it's such an honor. Welcome.
Yeah, that's such an honor to have been on your show with Colleen. Our team is are big fans of mindbodygreen. So this is a long time coming.
Well, you were very kind. And, let's start. Like many people in our space, you have a really powerful personal story which led you to your work. So let's start there by telling folks a bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, I know this conversation is about being mentally limitless. And my story kind of started on the other side of that, where I felt very limited. I grew up with some pretty severe learning challenges as a child, up to the age of 18. And one of the contributing factors was I had a traumatic brain injury when I was 5 years old. And so I was in kindergarten class and I took a very bad fall headfirst into an iron grate radiator and rushed to the emergency room. And my parents said it was, what really changed. Like, I was very playful, right? I was very curious. I was very energized. But after the accident, they said I became very shut down. It's, not only, and where it really showed up was in school. I had poor focus, poor memory. I had processing issues. So teachers would repeat themselves over and over again, trying to get me to understand something. And then I would learn to pretend to understand, but I didn't really understand. I remember I was slowing down the class when I was 9 years old. I remember as if it was yesterday, and I was being teased pretty bad, more that day than others. And um, the teacher came to my defense, and all I remember her doing, she pointed to me in front of the whole class and said, leave this boy alone. He's the boy with the broken brain. And I didn't know that my brain was broken, and that label became my limit, if you will. Every time you know, adults have to be very careful with their external words because they often become a child's internal words. So every single time I did badly in school, which was weekly, I would say, oh, because I have the broken brain. I didn't do well on that test because I have the broken brain. I wasn't picked for a sport that, it's in gym class because I have the broken brain. And that became more of my identity. And, we know the power of, I am statements in terms of how we see ourselves. And I just started seeing evidence throughout school that I was just limited. And so my inspiration really was my desperation. I was able to learn some skills and some basic strategies when I was 18 years old. And I went from below normal to, normal to, made progress above that. And just everything changed, not only my grades, but my life. Because when you struggle with something every single day, having the insecurity or the self doubt, um, it's kind of, it was a really dark place. But when I learned these skills, I felt, these two emotions. Number one, I felt, completely, confident in my own abilities. But then I also was very upset that I struggled every single day, with this. And there were simple things I could have done to make my life easier. And so I started to share it with others and started to tutor and doing classes. And one of my very first students, she was a freshman at college. She read 30 books in 30 days, Jason. I mean, I not skim or scan, really like read it. And that really stands out because who has that ability or even who has that drive? And I wanted to find out not how she did it. I wanted to know why. You and I, when I was talking about your book, which I'm sure everybody has right now, I'm holding in my hand, The Joy of Wellbeing, we talked about the power of purpose, which is the final chapter in your book. And I found out her purpose was in reading these books was her mom. Her mom was diagnosed by doctors with terminal cancer, was only given a couple months to live. And the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life. And, I wished her luck, prayers. 6 months go by and I don't hear from her. And one day I get a call from this young lady and she's crying profusely. I mean, hysterically. And when she finally stops and pauses, I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. The doctors don't know how or why. They called it a miracle. But her mother attributed 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And, I get goosebumps just thinking about that. I call them truth bumps. But in that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, as we often hear, then I think that learning is our superpower. That if knowledge is power, learning is our superpower. And it's a superpower that we all have, regardless of your age, or your background, your career, your education level, your financial situation, your gender, your history, your IQ. After 31 years as a brain coach, we have a lot of data and we have students in every country in the world online. And, we discovered more about the human brain in the past 10 years than the previous 1,000 years combined. And we found is we're grossly underestimating our own capability. That it's not how smart you are or how smart your kids are or how smart your significant other is or how smart your team is. It's not how smart you are. It's more, how are you smart? Not how smart you are. It's how are you smart? And we all have these genius capabilities that express itself in different ways. And that's really been my focus. I'm just obsessed with what creates genius. And I'm not talking about IQ, what creates somebody to be able to step into that version of themselves. Because I believe that there's a version of all of us that's patiently waiting. And the goal is we show up every single day until we're introduced to that person.
So thank you for sharing that. There's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to attempt to try to cover a lot of ground with you. And I think one thing I'm curious about, you went from being, the boy with the broken brain, so to speak, to obviously someone who's one of the leading experts on all things brain health and optimization. In that time period, in your teens, in your 20s, when things are starting to turn around for you, were there certain practices that really had an impact, where you really experienced an ROI, or where you said to yourself, you know what, I'm getting better. I feel good. My brain's working in a way it wasn't before.
What had happened, when I was 18, I was fortunate enough to get into a local university, and I thought freshman meant I could make a fresh start. That's what I thought it meant. And I took all these classes because I wanted to, you know, I wanted to make my parents proud. I wanted to show the world, show myself that I could do it. And I purposely, went somewhere where I didn't know anybody, in terms of school. So, because I find that the people you spend time with, their expectations of you, or it kind of reinforces. So I wanted to be able to have a fresh start. And, we do an annual brain performance conference every year. And one year we had Quincy Jones, the music producer, in the audience.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't, I gotta bring him on stage. And so we have this conversation where I wanted to talk to him about, and he turned 90 this year, which is remarkable. Not of his successes, because we all know about Michael Jackson and We Are the World and Oprah, but I wanted to know what his problems were. What are the problems he's facing? And then when I asked him about his problems, he was like, I have no problems. I'm like, well, we all have problems. He was like, no, Jim, I have puzzles. I was like, wow, okay. Because that totally changed it in my mind, because puzzles are fun. Puzzles, there are solutions to puzzles. And so when I was in school, I wanted to solve this puzzle, between my ears, called my brain, because our brains are our number one, asset to control, everything. And I wanted to show to people that you could be the pilot of your brain, and not just the, not the passenger. And so I wanted to solve this puzzle, this kind of black box. I always wear, if people are watching this on video, I'm wearing a brain on my shirt. And I always do that, or people see me on always pointing to my brain in photographs, because I feel like what you see, you take care of. You see your car, you take, care of your car, because it's in your awareness. You see your clothes, your hair, your skin. But we don't see the thing that takes care of us, right? That incredible gift we have between our ears, 3-pound gray matter, that doesn't come with an owner's manual. But I realized that when you understand how your brain works, you can work your brain. But to answer your question, when I was in school, I did very poorly, and as a freshman, I was ready to quit, because my parents immigrated to the United States. My father was 13, didn't speak the language. Lived in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at. It was we didn't have a lot of resources, so I didn't want to go to school and waste the money we didn't have. And so I didn't, but I didn't know how to tell them I wanted to quit, because I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and I really wanted to be a good role model, for my brother and my sister. So a friend of mine said, "Hey Jim, why don't, this is a big life decision. I'm going home this weekend. Why don't you come with me and just get some perspective?" And I've noticed, Jason, that a change of a point of view, you change the place or you change the people. That was the other thing that Quincy mentioned in our conversation. He mentioned that you have to go to know, that he loves to travel. He actually speaks over 20 languages. Many people don't know that about Quincy Jones. And, we do a lot of study with regards to foreign language learning and music. But he says you have to go to know, because when you go somewhere and you taste the food, the architecture, you hear the music, the language, it opens up your mind. And there's this Oliver Wendell Holmes quote that said, "A person's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions." And that's really a proof or evidence of neuroplasticity, that our brain is metaphorically, it's like plastic in a good way, that it's malleable and it could grow based on new stimulus. And because we always, prior to the understanding of neuroplasticity, we thought the brain was static and it was fixed, like your intelligence is fixed or your memory is fixed, like your shoe size. But when I went to wrap up the story, when I went to see his family, they're very well off, beautiful home on the water, and the father's walking me around his property and asked me a simple question before dinner. Says, "Jim, how's school?" And that was the worst question you could ask me at the time. So I just break down. I'm pretty reserved and I'm very introverted. But I start breaking down emotionally in front of this stranger. And I tell him my whole story about broken brain and quitting school. And he says, Jim, why are you in school? And that new question, I never asked myself, why am I in school? It's just something that you're supposed to do, right? But I was just like, he was like, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share? And nobody's ever asked me those questions before. And with asking a new question, you get new answers. So I go to answer him, and he puts his hand up. And he says, wait. And he reaches out in his back pocket. He pulls out a notebook and he tears out a couple of sheets and hands them to me and asks me to write them down, which I really do believe it's the first step in creating something externally. You take in something invisible in your mind and you write it down, and it becomes physical outside of yourself. And when I'm done, I start folding the sheets of paper to put in my pocket, and he reaches out and grabs them out of my hand, and he starts reading my dreams. And just to paint a picture, I'm 18 years old, very insecure, at the brink of just feeling like I'm actually useless. And now here's somebody who's pretty well off and happy, successful, looking at my dreams, which I haven't shared with anybody, right? And when he's done, he looks at me and he says, Jim, you are this close to everything on this list. And he spreads his index fingers maybe a foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way. Give me a lifetime, 10 lifetimes, I can't crack that list. But he takes his two index fingers and he puts them to the side of my head, meaning what's in between is like the bridge or the key that's going to get me the things on that list. And he takes me into a room of his home I've never seen before. It's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. I mean, I've never seen like a library in somebody's home before. And I never, it took me 3 years longer to learn how to read, with my brain injury. And so books weren't my friend. And it's like being in a room full of snakes. But what makes it worse, he starts going to the shelves and pulling snakes off the shelves and handing them to me. And I look at these titles, and they're these biographies of some incredible women and men in history, and some very early personal growth books like Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, and so on. And he says, Jim, leaders are readers. I want you to read one book a week. And I'm thinking, there's just no way. Have you not listened to anything I've been telling you about my broken brain and my learning challenges? Because it's funny, because people come to me at events all the time, and I'll do a demonstration where I'll have 100 people in the audience stand up and introduce themselves, and I'll memorize all their names, right? And I love to talk about how to remember names in this conversation, because I think it's very important for people to have that skill. But afterwards, I tell people I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you what's possible. Because the truth is, every single person listening could do things like that and even greater. We just weren't taught. Like, there was no class called memory back in school. I wish there was. That would have made life a lot easier for all of us. Reading, writing, arithmetic are the 3 R's. Obviously, spelling's not one of them. But what about retention or recall? Socrates said learning is remembering. And but we all could do it. We just weren't taught. And I've realized, we talked about this, and when I was interviewing you on my podcast, about this digital deduction, where algorithms doing the thinking for all of us, right? We don't have to exercise those muscles. And I realized that your brain is like a muscle. It's obviously an organ, but it responds like a muscle. It's use it or lose it. So anyway, I agree. I agree to read one book a week, but now I'm back at home, and back in my dorm room, and I have a pile of books I have to read for midterms and everything, and I have a pile of books I promised to read, and I already couldn't get through pile A. So what do? I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't work out, I don't socialize. We talked about the power of friendships in our conversation, and it's not very sustainable. I end up passing out in the library one night. I fall down a flight of stairs and I hit my head again, and I get rushed to the emergency. I woke up in the hospital. And by this time, because, it was a couple months of not eating or sleep, I was down to 117 pounds. I was hooked up to all these IVs. I thought I died. And it was the darkest time in my life. But when I also woke up, I thought there has to be a better way. And when I had that thought, the nurse came in with a mug of tea, and on it was a picture of Albert Einstein, someone who I thought was the opposite of me, but it had a quote that I'll always remember. I have it on my wall in my office. It said, "The same level of thinking that has created your problem won't solve your problem. The same level thing that's created your problem, health, relationships, won't solve it. And it made me ask a new question, because I think questions are the answer. It's like, how do I think differently about this? Well, so maybe I'm just, I don't not have a slow brain, I have a broken brain. Well, how do I think differently? Well, maybe I could have a better brain or a brighter brain, or maybe I could learn faster. And I said, where do I do that? In school, right? And I look at the course bulletin and all classes on what to learn, not how to learn. And I put it aside and I start studying this area called learning. It's called meta learning. Meta learning is the art and science of learning how to learn. And I think today in the 21st century, it is the most important skill set. Because if you can learn how to learn, you can learn how to focus and understand, process information, retain it, implement it. What can we apply that to? Everything, right? Our mind, medicine, martial arts, music, Mandarin, marketing, money, everything gets easier. And I put my attention on that. And then the light switch flipped on. And that's when my life really started to really unfold. And, I made it my mission, till then, is just building better, brighter brains, no brain left behind. But the things that I tend to do, Jason, is, and we talk a lot about it in Limitless, are my routines. I really do believe first you create your habits and your habits create you. And, our work is endorsed by like the number one Alzheimer's researcher out of Harvard University, Dr. Rudy Tanzi, the founding director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Brain Health. And through my presentations in these institutions, we know that 1/3 of someone's memory or brain performance is predetermined by genetics and biology, about 1/3. 2/3 is in our influence, right? And some people say it's 100% of influence based on epigenetics and so on, but a significant amount. And so there are 10 areas that I found through our research and reading and role modeling that really move the needle. And so these 10 things, I could share them if you like.
Yeah, because I think the question, which I'm thinking, and I'm sure our listeners are too, is okay, we've got, I think our audience has a great mindset, and they're saying, okay, 33% is genetics, but screw the genetics, 67% is on me. So what are the things that I can do to help my memory and recall in my everyday life? What are the things I can do?
Let's do it. I'll list a 10. And I encourage everyone to take some notes if they're not working out or driving. Note taking, it's really, it's a powerful way of overcoming the forgetting curve, right? We all know there's a learning curve. The forgetting curve says that within 48 hours of hearing something on a podcast, in a conversation, reading it in a book or at a lecture, upwards of 80% is forgotten within 2 days. And so, note taking is very important. Handwriting notes, by the way, has been shown to improve retention and comprehension better than digital note taking, which is interesting. I like digital note taking because it's easy to share, it's easy to save. But if you can do both, that's remarkable. So I'll give everyone the 10 keys in no particular order that will move the needle to help you have a more focused, a more powerfully mentally fit brain. And what I would ask everyone to do is make this a little bit, turn this into a master class. We don't just learn passively. The human brain doesn't learn through consumption. It actually learns better through creation and co-creation, because learning is not a spectator sport at all. So what I would ask the task here, if people are up for the challenge, is as I give you these 10 things, rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10. Like, how much energy and effort and attention am I putting towards this, this piece? So in no particular order, number one, I'll say, is a good brain diet. What you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. There's a whole area of science that I write about called neuronutrition, which says that your brain is only 2% of your body mass, but it requires 20% of the nutrients. And some of them are different nutrients than the rest of your body, because obviously your brain is part of your body. But and so I always prefer people get it from food, but that's my approach. And obviously everyone's a little bit different. Everyone responds to kale a little bit differently, right? And in terms of digestion, I would recommend people go to a function medicine doctor or do a microbiome test, food sensitivity test, and so on, nutrient profile test. But I'm not a doctor, so definitely go to a practitioner. But some of my favorite brain foods that are well researched: avocados, the monounsaturated fats, good for the brain. Blueberries, I like to call them brain berries. The antioxidants, very neuroprotective. Broccoli is good for the brain. I'll go through these kind of quick. Olive oil, wonderful for the brain. If you eat eggs, the choline in eggs is good for cognitive health. Green leafy vegetables like kale and spinach. And I can show everyone, by the way, how to memorize this list. A lot of people go to the store to buy one thing. Have you ever done this? Jason, know somebody who does this, go to the store to buy one thing. They come back with 2 grocery bags full of things, except for that one thing that they went to the store for. Um, so green leafy vegetables, good for the brain. If your diet allows, fish like wild salmon, sardines. Your brain is mostly fat, so those fish oils, if your diet allows, and that's part of your paradigm. A few more, I would say. Let's say turmeric. If you use turmeric, it's anti-inflammatory. I would say number 9, walnuts. And a walnut looks like the human brain. And so it's just a little memory aid to help remind you to eat their walnuts. It's high in vitamin E, which is good and neuroprotective. And finally, my favorite, dark chocolate. Not milk chocolate, but dark chocolate, not a lot of sugar. What's generally good for your mood is going to be good for your mind. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how well are we doing on our brain diet? On the other side, obviously, we know this common sense, but it's not often common practice. Processed foods, not so good for the brain. High sugar, not good for the brain, and so on. Now, number 2, killing ants. The second key to a limitless brain is killing ants is good for your brain. Ants, obviously not the insect, it's an acronym. I tend to use a lot of mnemonics. ANTS stands for automatic negative thoughts. And I get that from our dear friend, Dr. Daniel Amen, who talks about that, automatic negative thoughts. Remember, like our mindset makes a difference. Somebody can learn a method on how to remember names, but like people come to me, Jason, at events, during breaks, and it's like, Jim, I'm just too old. They whisper this in private somewhere. I'm just like, oh my God, I can't, if I don't write my grocery list in triplicates, I'm going to forget it. Right. And I always tell people, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. If you fight for limitations, you get to keep them. And so many people fight for what they can't do. And our brains are they're these incredible supercomputers, and our self-talk is the program that will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering names, you won't remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. I'd recommend everyone write this first principle down, that all behavior is belief driven. All behavior is belief driven. If you want to create new results in your life, vibrant health or a certain weight loss or a relationship or a certain monetary goal, we have to do a new behavior, right? But in order to do that new behavior, we need a belief that says that behavior is possible, right? And so automatic negative thoughts on a scale of 0 to 10, how positive and encouraging are your thoughts? Because if people truly understood, Jason, how powerful their minds are, they wouldn't say or think something they didn't want to be true. And that's not to say you have one negative thought, it ruins your life. Obviously, that's not the case. But any more than eating that one donut will ruin your life. But if you did it consistently, little by little, a little becomes a lot, right? Same with our thoughts. So we're ingesting that junk food, which is interesting, junk food, because there's junk and there's food. I don't know what junk food is. But just like having that negative thought, it's just it compounds. So I would say on a scale of 0 to 10, how positive, encouraging are your thoughts? And the rest I'll go through fast. Number 3 for a limitless brain is exercise. We know as your body moves, your brain grooves. When you move your body, you create brain-derived neurotropic factors, which is fancy BDNF. It's like fertilizer for neuroplasticity. And I don't mean just doing like CrossFit 3 times a week or, doing yoga a few times a week. I mean, like, how much are we moving throughout the day? It's so very important. There's research that shows that when you listen to a podcast like yours or mine or any podcast or an audiobook, and you're going for a brisk walk or you're on elliptical, doing something rhythmic, you'll actually retain and understand that information better. As you mentioned, in our interview on our podcast, that what's good for your heart's going to be good for your head, right? Or your brain, blood flow, oxygen, and so on. And it definitely helps, when we're doing that. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how much are we moving throughout the day? I always think it's important to take a brain break every 30 minutes or an hour, get off the screen and, take 5 or 10 minutes, go for that walk with the dog, do some deep breathing. I always recommend people hydrate because Did you know that just staying hydrated will boost your reaction time and thinking speed upwards of 30%? Yes, as we both drinking our water, but especially at nighttime, we can lose up to a pound of water when we sleep through respiration and perspiration. So make sure you're hydrated. That's a huge lift, 30%. And so I would say when you take your brain break, hydrate, get oxygen. A lot of people suffer from mental fatigue or brain fog because they're just not breathing, right? Or when they're reading, they fall asleep. And part of it is their posture. They're slumped over and their diaphragm is collapsed. And the lower 1/3 of our lungs actually has been shown to absorb 2/3 of the oxygen. So just little reminders for everybody, even as you're listening to this, to be able to sit upright and make sure you get enough oxygen. All right, so that's then number 3 is exercise. So 0 to 10, how physically active are we daily? Are you getting your steps in? Walking is just, we talked about it again in when my interview with you and Colleen. So important. Number 4, brain nutrients. And this is where maybe you're not getting it from your food. We know the soil has deteriorated over time, doesn't have the same nutrients. And again, go to a health practitioner and do a nutrient profile, because you can learn a great technique on how to read faster or speed reading or learn languages, all the things that we teach. But, if you're not giving your brain the nutrients, right, the techniques we teach is kind of like the software. The stuff I'm talking about is upgrading the hardware. And so part of it is the nutrients, right? So if you're low in vitamin B, a lot of people, some say that upwards of 50% of the U.S. is low volume of vitamin D. It's very important. Vitamin D is very neuroprotective. Your omega 3s, DHA. So you might need a supplement if you're not getting it from your food. I always prefer food, but if you need a supplement. So on a scale of 0 to 10. Number 5 is something that I know that you and Colleen live by, is when we talked about joy of well-being, is positive peer group. So we know that it's not just your neurological networks, it's your social networks. That if you it has less to do with your biology, smoking, and more to do with, does your friend's friend smoke, right? Because we have these things in our nervous system. We have something called mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are our imitation cells, and that we tend to imitate the people we spend the most time with. They say we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. If you're around 9 broke people, be careful, because you're probably going to be number 10. And I always tell people to watch, WATCH. And you're thinking like, wow, this person uses a lot of, I'm a memory coach, so I use a lot of acronyms. Watch. We tend to imitate the W in watch, words. We tend to use the same language as people around us, right? And those words affect our nervous system. The A in watch, actions. We tend to have the same behaviors as the people around we spend time with. The T in watch are thoughts. We tend to have the same thought patterns and beliefs of the people around us that we spend the most time with. The C is our character. We tend to model our integrity and our character. I saw this quote recently. I don't know who to attribute it to, but it said, integrity is measured by the distance between someone's lips and their life. Integrity is measured between the distance between someone's lips and their life. And you and I were talking about algorithms on social media, and and I think it's, you mentioned, which was interesting to me, that awe, anger, and anxiety is something, most that gets the most engagement, which is kind of interesting. But it's also, I think it's important when we talk about social media that we practice what we post. Right. It's better well done than well said, for sure. So I've always taken the approach, instead of just saying it, show it. Instead of promising it, prove it, and especially to ourselves. And so positive peer group, the C is character. And finally, the watch, the H in watch are habits. First, you create your habits, and then your habits create you. You create your habits of drinking plenty of water, prioritizing your sleep, meditating each day, doing yoga, reading each day. And those habits create us back. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how positive a peer group do you have? And again, sometimes the people that pull us down we give them the power, our family or, friends. And maybe they could have good intentions, right? They see you like, why always listen to those podcasts and watching all, like all those, reading all those books all the time. but they could have good intention, but maybe they don't want to lose you, or maybe they don't want you to change. Maybe they don't want you to get your hopes up, but they could be sincere, but they could be sincerely wrong. But the good thing is we could choose our peer group. We could love our family and our friends, but we could choose the people that we have, that we give the influence, allow them to influence our thoughts, our feelings, our identity. Because we all need people. When you think about positive peers, and you talk about it a lot, in your book, who encourage us, to challenge us, that are kind to us, that cheerlead for us. And if you haven't found that person yet, my suggestion would be that person for somebody else. Especially be that person for you, for yourself. So that's number 5 on a scale of 0 to 10. And then the last half of it, 6, is a clean environment. Research shows that a clean environment, that your external world is a reflection of your internal world. And we know this anecdotally. When you make your bed, or you clean your desk, or you put all the files on your screen in the right folders, then you have clarity of mind. So it's remind everybody to Marie Kondo your mind by really optimizing your environment and having more things. I got so much out of our conversation, with you and Colleen. It's just what brings you joy. I think a lot of times we're burnt out, because a lot of people feel burnt out. Maybe it's not all because we're doing too much. Maybe we feel burnt out because we're doing too little of the things that make us come alive, right? That really spark, that joy inside of us. So that's why I love, our conversation about that. And so, clean environment, 0 to 10. Number 7, this is a big one: sleep. When it comes to your brain health, if you didn't sleep the night before, how's your ability to focus? How's your ability to solve problems? What's your attention span like? How's your memory? How's your mental energy? We had our first baby a few months ago, so sleep is amongst the top of priorities. So we could talk about, we've done many episodes, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to sleep optimization. But it's when you sleep for your brain, it's where you consolidate short to long-term memory. So if you have long-term memory issues, do a sleep study. You can even do it at home. Number 2 is where you clean out beta amyloid plaque that could lead to brain aging challenges. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, because not only did I have my learning disabilities that came from a TBI, but also at that same time, my grandmother, who my parents worked, many jobs, and I probably had 3 brain injuries before age 12 because I wasn't very well supervised. But my grandmother took care of me, and she passed of Alzheimer's. So she started showing around the same time, when I was 5 or 6 years old, early signs of dementia. So that's why we gave away the proceeds to my book Limitless, not only to build schools around the world, Guatemala, Kenya, Ghana, fully funded healthcare, clean water teachers, but also to Alzheimer's research, specifically for women, because women are twice as likely to experience Alzheimer's than men. Yet a lot of the research is done on male brains and treatments on male brains. So it's just something we're passionate about. But sleep is required. That's where the sewage system kicks in when you're sleeping. And then finally, 8, 9, and 10. Eighth thing is brain protection, meaning how well are you protecting your brain or your children's brain? Sports, I work with a lot of people, athletes in the NHL, in hockey, or the NFL, football, UFC, a lot of concussions, and our brain is very resilient, but it's also very fragile. So wear a helmet, and the things that are common sense, 0 to 10. And then finally, 9 and 10, new learnings is number 9. And new learnings, there was a great study on longevity. I don't know if you saw it, on these nuns. It's called Aging with Grace. Great longevity study, name for a title. And it was on the cover of Time magazine. They found that these women were living 80, 90 and above. And they wanted to find out what was the contributing factors. And they said about half of it was their emotional faith, their gratitude. But the other half, they were lifelong learners. And because of it, it did add years to their life and then life to their years. And so, on a scale of 0 to 10, and I assume most people who are listening to this, I'm preaching as a choir because you're a 10, right? Because you're always learning. So always learning, but that's how we create the new connections in our brain. Sometimes, the 2 biggest dips in cognitive performance, it's interesting, is when students graduate school, because somehow they associate education and learning. When their formal education is done, their learning is done. And the other time is retirement. Often when people retire, they put their minds are retired also, and their body is not far behind. And so on a scale of 0 to 10, new learnings. And then finally, the last one, it's almost an invisible villain, stress management. Chronic stress has been shown to actually shrink the human brain. When you cortisol, adrenaline, when you're in fight or flight all the time, it kind of hijacks and keeps you hostage in your survivor brain and doesn't allow you access to like your creative brain to be able to solve problems, to be able to focus at the task at hand. And so I would say on a scale of 0 to 10, how well are you managing stress? 10 being, yes, I'm meditating, I'm getting some body work done and some cranial sacral, and I'm going for nice walks and experiencing joy. But what are you doing to mitigate the stress? So those are the 10 go to, because everyone wants to know what the magic pill is. What's the magic pill to be able to have a perfect memory? And there's not a pill, but there's a process.
I love it. It's such a thorough list, and building off this invisible villain. And I think everyone understands the obvious things that are doing damage. Smoking, drinking too much, drug use, obesity, and so forth. But what are some of the more sneaky or less obvious ways that are hurting our memory we're probably not aware of?
I would say four things. I write about it in the intro to Limitless. It's upgrade your brain, learn anything faster, unlock your exceptional life. And I talk about the four horsemen of the mental apocalypse that are it's a little dramatic, right? And nowadays it's just education doesn't land as much as education plus some entertainment, and then you have real empowerment. But imagine these four horsemen that are really laying siege on our mental health. And I tend to alliterate, so I'll make them all D's, the letter D's, to make it easy to remember. The first one is digital deluge, and I coined that term. It's basically the day we're drowning in information and overload. So it's hard to be able to do the things we need to do because we're just inundated. It's like taking a sip of water out of a fire hose. I would imagine a lot of listeners, they have books on their shelf that they haven't read yet, and it becomes shelf help, not self help, right? Um, we put actually for your listeners, if people go to a link on Instagram, on my Instagram, I put a 1 hour masterclass on accelerated reading. So not just reading speed, but reading comprehension. But people could go there and it's just free. You'll learn how to improve your reading speed and comprehension 50%, because it's a whole kind of strategy and exercises that you and your family could do. But digital deluge that really is challenging for our mind, because we're just overloaded and overwhelmed. We're drowning in information, but we're starving for like that wisdom and the ability to swim. We haven't been really taught. Because think about reading. When's the last reading is a skill? You're not born with the ability to read. But when's the last time we took a class called reading? How old were we? 6, 7?
Right. And the way kids, our daughter who's in kindergarten right now, the way she's learning how to read is completely different from the way I learned how to read. And I'm almost looking at like, I don't know if I can help you, but I'll try.
Math is a lot of the subjects. It's similar. Some things have changed, some things haven't changed. Like the school. Like we live in an age of autonomous electric cars, spaceships, going to Mars. But our vehicle of choice, often when it comes to education, is more comparable to like a horse and buggy. They say of Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle, the guy that slept for like decades. If he woke up today, the only thing he would recognize are our classrooms. And that's not a slight against teachers. My mother became a special education teacher to help me with my challenges. She recently retired out of the New York public school system. Teachers are some of the most compassionate, committed, capable, caring people. They're not. I don't think they're compensated, as well. And it's a challenge today with technology. And so the first one is digital deluge. So they're all four of them are driven by technology. Technology doesn't cause them, but it certainly accelerates and exasperates the situation. So the second thing besides digital deluge is digital distraction. How do you maintain your focus in a world full of rings, pings, dings, app notifications, social media alerts? We're like, share, we're getting this dopamine flood, and it becomes very addicting. And that's a big challenge. So we're driven to distraction. I have a video on Facebook has like 27 million views, just talking about came out like 7 or 8 years ago. just don't touch your phone the first 30 minutes of the day. And I know it's become popular, but it's this one thing to know it, but it's another to actually practice it. Because if the first thing we do is pick up our phones in the morning, when you wake up, you're in this relaxed state of awareness. You're very suggestible. And the first thing you input there is your phone, then you're rewiring your brain for two things that might be affecting your productivity and definitely your peace of mind. Number one, distraction. Right, that's a given. Like the human brain wasn't created in having the world's information like access to it like in scrolls. Right, there's so many context switching when you're flipping through 1,000 different things that your brain is like lighting up, and it's driving us to the distraction. And we wonder why we can't focus at work or focus when we need to study or be there with our kids. And so, but the second thing it rewires our brain to do first thing in the morning, not only distraction, but reaction, which is almost as debilitating, meaning, you could get one voicemail message or an email or a text, and it could just hijack our mood, for hours or the entire day. Our friend Brendan Burchard says your inbox is nothing but a convenient organizational system for other people's agenda for your life.
You roll the dice. When you choose to open email or text in the morning, you roll in the dice. It could be a great or be terrible.
Yes, absolutely. And so we want to be able to, there's a quote in Limitless from a French philosopher that says, life is the C. Life is the letter C between the letter B and D. Life is C between B and D. B is birth, D is death. Life C, choice. Like we always have, it's like our lives are the sum total of all the choices we've made up to this point, right? Who are you going to spend time with? Who are we going to marry? What are we going to eat? What are we going to feed our minds? Where are we going to live? And a career? All those choices add up to, big things. And so I would say little choices we make, even like every day I ask myself, is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain? Just a little filter system to make me conscious, of what's going on. But I would say with digital distraction, the reaction is the challenge, because if you're just fighting fires, you're waking up and just on the defense, reacting to messages or emails or whatever, then we build that muscle, just like the distraction muscle. We're flexing it, their reaction muscle, and then we're just reactive the entire day. I always say that you want to be a thermostat. You don't want to be a thermometer. A thermometer reacts to whatever the environment gives it, right? It just reacts, and that's all it does. A thermostat doesn't react. It gauges. It knows the temperature of the environment. It gauges it. It has awareness, but it also, sets the temperature, right? You set a temperature. And human beings, we set temperatures with our standards, with our vision, with our mission, and our KPIs are here. And then we take the invisible, we make it visible. But we are 100% responsible for our lives, and I think that's an important, empowering belief for everybody to entertain. And then finally, besides digital deluge and digital distraction, the two other ones, the last for the four horsemen, is digital deduction. And this is a commentary that I talked about algorithms. Is that it's a term I coined, digital deduction, where we're outsourcing our thinking capabilities to our devices. It's telling this is the first generation. They did a study with kids that this generation has less logic and rational abilities than the previous generation. They're contributing it partly to algorithms. It's telling you what to eat and when to turn and do all. So we don't have to build that visual spatial intelligence and do all the things that we used to have to do.
I think about the AI is in the zeitgeist right now and a big part of the conversation. And I think there's obviously going to be a lot of good, but I think about exactly what you're saying. And I think about kids.
Yes, AI is, it's interesting when it comes to, and I'll give you the fourth horseman. AI for me is a tool like all technology. Like everything I'm mentioning here is technology. For me, my perspective is not necessarily good or bad. It's just the application, right? So like fire could cook your food and fire could burn down your home. Like it's just how it's utilized. AI, instead of artificial intelligence, which it really is more machine learning, for me, it's more augmented intelligence, where I'm always thinking about how can AI improve HI? How can AI improve human intelligence? And even using like GPT and things, our team uses it even for learning, accelerated learning. We'll take the principles in Limitless and apply it towards like simple things. Like if somebody wanted to learn something in neuroscience, you could use the the Richard Feynman technique, which is explaining something, making it so simple instead of complex. And you can put it like, explain this concept to me as if I'm a 5-year-old. And it's a wonderful way to be able to learn something. You could teach it to help you to mind map new information, or help you to create a memory palace, or use, one of our techniques like the story method and help you to be able to learn things that you need to give a speech on, or so on. And the fourth thing, besides digital deluge, digital distraction, digital deduction, which, you talk a lot about, in terms of algorithms, is digital dementia. And digital dementia is this idea where our smart devices are making us less smart, where they act as external memory drives for us. So we don't need to flex our memory muscles. Like, Jason, how many phone numbers did you know growing up?
Oh God, all of them.
Yeah, all of them. Literally, everyone always says all of them.
Everyone. Yeah.
How many phone numbers do you probably know currently?
My wife, Colleen, and my mother. And that's,
And you could be texting or calling somebody, every single day. But if your phone had no battery or you didn't have it on you,
you bring this up, and I'm like, you know what? I still remember some of my childhood friends' home phone numbers.
and I think everyone listening could identify with that. And it's not that I want to memorize 500 phone numbers, right? But it should be concerning to us. We've lost the ability to remember one, or a PIN number, or a passcode, or a seed phrase, or something we just, we were going to say, or a conversation that we had, or a meeting.
But I think what you're hitting on here, in my view, is our selective memories. It's something I don't have to memorize anymore, so I don't. There are other things I need to memorize, so I do. But phone numbers went from it was a must-have to now it's pointless. So I'm not. My brain doesn't even. I don't even think twice about memorizing any phone number.
And it's true, selective memory. And, we were having a conversation offline about this. It's very powerful. Like when you have something in part of your brain called the reticular activating system, RAS, which is what determines what we're going to focus on. So at any given time, we could be thinking or focusing on a billion different stimuli, right? Primarily, our brain is a deletion device. It's trying to keep information out. Otherwise, if we let everything, we would be overwhelmed, right? We would go insane. And so primarily we're trying to filter, and our RAS, reticular activating system, determines where we're shining a spotlight on something. And part of what controls the RAS are the questions that we have. So when you ask a question, it goes to, like, for example, years ago, my sister would send me postcards and emails about a very specific breed of dog. It was a pug dog. And it's funny, like I was like, why is she sending me these images? And I realized that her birthday was coming up, and it was like, she's a good marketer. And but the funny thing happened, Jason, I started seeing these pug dogs everywhere. I would go to the supermarket, I'd be checking out, and somebody in front of me is holding a pug dog. Or I'm jogging in my neighborhood, and I swear someone that day was walking 6 pug dogs. My question for everyone listening is, did those pug dogs just magically appear in my world? No, they were always there. I just never, it wasn't important because I wasn't asking the question. I wasn't shining a spotlight there. And the lesson I take out of this is, ask and you shall receive, right? And a lot of us have the answers we're looking for, but we're not asking the right question. I have something in Limitless that talks about our dominant question, the question we ask more than any other question. And, we have about 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And a lot of those thoughts come in the form of questions. But if your question is, how come this always happens to me? Then you're going to you're shining the spotlight on evidence that's just probably not the most empowering, as opposed to, how can I bring more joy into this moment? How can I do this and enjoy this process? What's the best use of this?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think selective memory is an area where we could all use some work. And you use the example of the dogs. I'll never forget, in 2002, I was living in Washington, D.C., and this is when the Beltway sniper was there. And it was horrifying. It was the sniper. He was just picking people off randomly. And then there was a news alert. He's in a white van. I remember. Then all of a sudden, I'm seeing white vans everywhere. It's like, oh, there's white vans, and they're just like everywhere. White vans, white vans, white vans. And it speaks to this larger notion of we have so many inputs on a daily basis. Some of them are bad, some of them are pointless, and some of them are meaningful. Some of them are positive. How do we get better about selecting what we choose to remember? Throw out some of the garbage or discard it, some of the negative, and get better at retaining the important and the positive. I think that's a challenge we all have.
I would say a good starting point is really control. We control the controllables, right? I think when it comes to our lives, which is full of time, I wouldn't go to time management, but I would look at priority management or mind management, right? Meaning that when it comes to priority management, I always tell people the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing, right? And so we're focused on the things that matter. Like I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, like I mentioned, but I want to build my memory so I am mentally fit. I have this brain fitness. So even if I didn't use a technique, I'm more likely to remember something because I'm using those muscles. Meaning that if I put my arm in a sling for a year, it wouldn't grow stronger. It wouldn't even stay the same. It would grow weaker, right? And that's what's going on with this digital dementia, meaning that technology can be very convenient, obviously, but it could also be very crippling. If somebody lives on the fifth floor of their building and they take the lift or the elevator every single time, there's a cost in not utilizing your body, right? And as opposed to using the stairs. So that technology, an elevator, is very convenient. But we still want to get, like some people, I saw somebody the other day take an Uber to go 6 blocks. I was like, why aren't we walking this? It's nice, you know what I mean? But it's just, they're on autopilot. And so what I would say here when it comes to our memory, it's important that we have purpose in remembering something. You talk about purpose in your book, like what's my outcome? Because without reasons, you won't get the results. Reasons reap results. Even when you want to remember someone's name, right? A lot of people forget people's names because there's no reason. They don't feel, or they know it intellectually, but they don't feel it. I think things have, there are three H's: head, heart, hands. So people could visualize things in their head and set goals in their head, but if they're not acting on that with their hands, check in with the second H, which is your heart, right? The emotions, the energy of motion. You have to be able to feel it, meaning we're not logical, we are biological. You think about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, we're this chemical feeling soup, right? But if we don't feel something, we're not going to get the results. And so we tend to remember things. The key to a long-term memory is information by itself is forgettable, but information combined with emotions become unforgettable. I mean, just imagine, I'm sure there's a song everyone could hear, maybe even a few notes that could take you back to when you're a teenager because the information tied to emotion, or there's a food or a fragrance could take you back to when you're a child, right? Because the information by itself is forgettable, but once you add emotion to it, it becomes unforgettable. And so I would say head, heart, hands, check in with the second H, which is the heart. Like for reasons reap results, remembering someone's name, ask yourself, why? Why do I want to remember this person's name? How will that make them feel? How will that make me feel? And I think it's the number one business etiquette networking skill there is, because how are you going to show somebody you're going to care for their health, their family, their finances, their future, whatever you have to offer them, if you don't care just to remember their name. So just asking yourself, why do I want to remember this? And coming up with one answer, maybe to show the person respect, maybe to make a new friend, maybe to get a referral, maybe to practice these things, that I learned on this podcast, right? And then just coming up with one reason, you're more likely to get the result.
Walk us through that, because we meet people all the time and it's very common to forget someone's name. And I think it's great practice, and it's great for all the reasons you just outlined. So give us a real world, let's put this into practice. We just meet someone. How do we remember this person's name? I think that's an important life skill.
Yeah. This is a great life skill to have, especially at work, and just, again, showing people that you care about them. Remember, everyone, I'll give you an acronym. Remember SWAV. SWAV. Like next time you want to remember names, you're checking yourself in the mirror, your makeup, your clothing, just say, I'm going to be suave today. And the S stands for say the name. You want to say the name when you hear it. So you meet somebody and they tell you their name and you repeat it back. Jason, it's nice to meet you. Because just hearing it again, you get to hear it twice, improves your ability to be able to remember it. You get to hear it twice, right? Repetition. But the second thing you do is you want to suave. The U is use it. You want to use it 3 or 4 times in the conversation, but you don't want to abuse it. You don't want to say, Jason, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Jason, do you want to grab something? Jason, Jason. That would be an abuse, right? Like a Seinfeld episode. I think there was a Seinfeld episode about
Love Seinfeld.
yeah, Seinfeld where he was dating somebody and forgot her name. And yeah, it rhymed with a part of the female anatomy. And then every time like his friends would come by, like Kramer or George, they would introduce themselves and try to get the woman to say their name. But it's one of those things where it's like the close talker episode, but it's an everyday situation that we're faced. But remembering names is so important. So I would just say use it 3 or 4 times in the conversation. The A in suave, and this is great for names that are unfamiliar to you, maybe an unusual name that you haven't heard before. The A is ask. Ask about a person's name. How do you spell it? What's the origin? Where's it from? Does it mean something in another language? Right? They say a name is the sweetest sound to a person's ears. So take an interest in somebody by asking them about their name. Who are you named after? Right? All these things you could ask. And then finally, the V and the E. The V is visualize the person's name. For most people, we tend to remember things better that we see than what we hear. There's a proverb that says, "What I hear, I forget. What I see, I understand." No, sorry. What I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I saw the face, I remember the face, right? And what I do, going back to power of practice, practice makes progress, right? And so, like you go to somebody and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. You never go to someone and say, I remember your name, but I forgot your face, right? Our visual cortex is actually the largest part of our brain. So we tend to remember things that we see. So if we tend to remember what we see, try seeing what you want to remember. So for example, you meet somebody and their name happens to be Carol. And just for a split second, imagine as you're shaking their hand that they are singing Christmas carols. It's kind of silly, right? Especially if it's not the time of the season. And you'll always remember it because when you say goodbye 20 minutes later, oh, what were they doing? Singing Christmas Carol. What's their name? Carol. And this is just to overcome what I call the 6-second syndrome. When somebody tells you something, you have their name, for instance, you have 6 seconds to do something with that information. Otherwise, it's just lost in the ether, right? So if you meet someone named Mike, for a split second, imagine they jump on the table and start singing karaoke on a microphone. And if it says that's so childish, who are the fastest learners? Right? Children. How fast can children learn a musical instrument or another language? They're very playful, and they visualize. And so, come up with something that sounds like a person's name or reminds you of a person, and you're more likely to remember it if you could see it. And then finally, the E in suave, end. You want to end the conversation using their name. Because if you could walk into a room and meet 10 strangers and leave saying goodbye to every single one of them by name, who are they all going to remember? They're all going to remember you. So say goodbye using their name. So those are just a handful of tips on how to remember names and faces. And if people even went online, that same link, jimkwik.com/more, not only is there a masterclass on speed reading, but there's also the video on there, a memory one, where I take people right on stage and I demonstrate it, where strangers come on and they introduce themselves to the whole audience, and I show people in a fun, creative way on how to remember names with confidence.
I love it. We're definitely going to link to that in the show notes. You've mentioned, children are great learners, and then there's this moment when we finish college, and then another moment when we retire. Can you walk us through, by decade, let's say 20s through 80s, are there certain things we should be prioritizing in terms of our learning? Does that change over time from, our 20s to our 80s and so on?
So research says we could grow older, but certainly we could grow better because, we can always upgrade our knowledge, skills, and our abilities. And there's such wisdom that comes from experience, right? It gives us more schema and references that when we're younger, we just don't have. And that's one of the reasons why I like reading so much, because it allows us to live many lifetimes, right? When you read biographies of other individuals and the life lessons full of insights and inspiration from others. But we do slow down, certainly, in terms of our reaction time. Our thinking speed slows down, just like our body which our brain is part of our body, tends to slow down as we age. And I mentioned the two declines when people graduate school and when they retire out. What I'd like everyone to do is just turn it into a habit or a set of habits or routines to keep your brain active. And so we mentioned like 10 things that people could do. I focus on, we hear a lot about physical fitness, right? And you talk about this, in Joy of Wellbeing, where we hear a lot about diet and hear a lot about exercise. Also social, like learning is not solo, but it's social. And so what I would think along this way is having a book club would be a social way of learning, right? On our team calls every month for our team, and we have team members around the world globally. We have guests come on Zoom and share for 30 minutes and do Q&A. We have books that our team are reading, in unison. We'll add your book also as well, to a future on our book list. But, as we grow older, we do slow down in terms of reaction time and thinking speed. But you could also stave off brain aging challenges by keeping mentally active. Again, my favorite go-to is reading. I think reading is to your mind what exercise is to your body, but it requires that you schedule it. It's one of those things where most people could actually read a book a week. It sounds daunting if the average person reads only 2 books a year. But it's amazing. Like, I'm just finishing my next book and turning it in. The average book has about 64,000 words. And which that sounds like a lot, but the average person only reads 200 words per minute. So if you divide those numbers together, that means it takes about 320 minutes to get through one book. If you divide 320 by 7 days in a week, it's about 45 minutes a day. So it's not out of, out of the realm of possibility. People can't get this in, reading 45 minutes a day, maybe 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. But, the rewards that come from, if people ever see me on, like on social media with Elon or with Oprah or whoever, people ask how we connected. We bonded over books.
So the question I have is, in our age of, we're commuting, we're multitasking. Well, multitasking is a bad thing, but let's just say we're commuting. Audiobooks, same benefit or no?
Yes. So audiobooks, it's actually when people are tested for the two things that matter, comprehension and retention, right? So like when we teach speed reading, it's not just skimming or scanning. I work with a lot of doctors, and you don't want your doctor to get the gist of what she reads, right? You want hopefully we teach smart reading, so whether people read it faster or not, that they understand it. But I would say when it comes to audiobooks don't test as well for retention and comprehension. But part of it though is because usually when people listen to an audiobook, they're doing something else, right? So they're driving or they're cleaning the house, so their attention is split. So that would be the contributing factors in terms of why they're not absorbing or retaining or understanding as much, because their attention, you can't multitask, right? It's task switching. You can't do 2 cognitive activities at once. It's equivalent of driving and trying to text, right? And that's equivalent of driving, intoxicated. And so multitasking is definitely a myth. But I would say audiobooks are great. I listen to audiobooks and I listen to podcasts, including yours. And so I would say it's great to use as a commuting time, or when you're working out, or you're going, for a nice walk, or cleaning the house. It's wonderful. But you're not going to get the same retention understanding if you're not focused on the task like anything else.
So I feel like we're just scratching the surface today, and we're definitely going to have you back again, because we are scratching the surface. I know you get an amazing book coming out in November, but something I wanted to touch on before we go. You've got this great quiz, and I love a good archetype, and you've got some archetypes. And so can you briefly walk us through, and I love the names, the cheetah, owl, dolphin, and elephant archetypes. Walk us through briefly, and let's direct people to the quiz as well.
Thank you. So this is the first conversation I've had with anyone outside of our team. So this is the first time that I'm talking about it publicly. This past year, based on the feedback that we get, and we have, again, students in every in 195 nations online, and we have a lot of data. And people are always asking about specific questions about focus, memory, learning styles, and it part of it comes down to these archetypes. And what we found through research, my own research, is there are about 4 categories of cognitive types. And I'll explain, what they are very briefly. People could take the quiz. We'll forward jimkwik.com/mindbodygreen. All right, so I'll make it simple. You have to spell my last name right, Kwik, jimkwik.com/mindbodygreen. You can take the quiz absolutely free, and you'll get a multiple page report on how you can tackle your studying, your memory, your ability to read faster based on your cognitive style. And so I pulled from this, so it's called the brain code. And code stands for the 4 animals, CODE. The cheetah is the fastest animal on the planet. So these are your fast doers. So the cognitive style here are people who love the environment where it's fast paced, there's a lot of change, and they go more on their intuition, as an example. The O in code are the owls, and your owls, the archetype of the owl is very logical, right? Their cognitive style thrives on data, right? Facts and figures. And some people could see themselves in that. The D is the dolphin. And the dolphin for me are the creatives. They are the creative visionaries, if you will. And finally, the E are the elephants. And the elephants are your empaths. They are the ones that love to collaborate. And they live socially and they learn socially. They love working in teams. And so the test allows you to unleash your inner owl, cheetah, dolphin, and elephant. And once you know those unique strengths, you could apply it towards accelerated learning. You could apply it towards enhanced productivity. You could apply it towards your own personal growth. So the owls are your logical thinkers. These are the individuals that are very analytical. They're organized. They're detail-oriented. They excel at tasks that require critical thinking, systematic approaches. The cheetah, they thrive on action, intuition. They're very quick thinkers. They excel in fast-paced environments because they adapt easily to new challenges. The dolphin represents, again, your visionaries, your creatives. And I think a lot of the future belongs to the creatives. These are people that really lean into imagination. They're very curious. They're innovative thinkers. They require things they excel in, things that require creativity, flexibility, pattern recognition would fall in that category. And then the elephants are your collaborative connectors. They're, as I mentioned, highly empathetic. They're communicative, they team-oriented. They excel at things that, negotiation, relationship building. And so I pulled, from various sciences to be able to build this, and people could go and get all the science, out of the test. Again, it's jimkwik.com/mindbodygreen. There are a couple dozen questions, like when faced with a problem, do you prefer to XYZ. When learning something new, do you prefer to break it down into smaller parts, dive right in, learn hands-on experience, discuss and exchange ideas with others, reflect on it, and connect it with existing knowledge, and so on. But we pulled from things like, as inspiration, left right brain dominance, Myers-Briggs, multiple intelligence theory. I mean, it's so wonderful because once you know where your primary cognitive type is, your code, if you will, it makes life a lot easier. And then also when you connect with your team and they take the quiz, it allows you to know how to communicate best with them, how to be able to motivate them also as well. And you could also design your teams around, and your learning around your specific type. So if somebody is a cheetah, they know that, setting short-term goals is very, very powerful. Embracing experiential learning, taking breaks to recharge, develop time management skills in certain areas. Your owl, use structure routines, learn through logic and puzzles and brain teasers and all those. So it'll give you a detailed report based on it. And it's a lot of fun too, also as well. When people post their results, I would make sure they tag us, because I would love to see, people. And I'll actually gift, if you post it and tag mindbodygreen, tag myself at Jim Kwik, I'll gift out a few copies, signed copies of Limitless, just as a thank you for participating. It's just at, again, jimkwik.com/mindbodygreen.
I love it. I encourage everyone to take it. I'm going to take it. I'm listening to you and I'm saying, wow, I'm a combination of all these. I don't know which one I'm going to be. I'm so intrigued. So I'm definitely going to take it. And when you come back, we'll have to discuss my results.
Absolutely.
Jim, thank you so much.
Jason, then thank you so much. I just want to thank you and Colleen for, been big, our team has been big fans and followers of Mind Body Green. So like now is a time we need more, and I love like so much science based, tools and also inspiration. That's how people ask how you can become limitless in a limited world. We do it together. Right. And I truly believe that I say that life is like an egg, that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if it's broken by an inside force, life begins. And great things begin on the inside. And if you're still listening to this conversation, you're self-selected. You've raised your hand. You're already, subscribed to this. And I think now is the time to unlock even more of that genius. So thank you very much.
You are very welcome. We love all of your work, Jim, and it's just been great to have you on the show. Thank you.